Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into Health Podcast Show, the place to be to get the insights of leaders working at the intersection of health, science, and media. I'm your host, Dan Kendall, and this episode features a recording from the 2025 Health Podcast Summit, which was held on October 1st and 2nd. In total, we interviewed 42 speakers in 37 sessions that span topics across health, science, policy, and podcasting. You can wait to get access to all the sessions as we publish them here on your favorite platform, or you can get access to all the recordings, links, and resources by visiting our website at healthpodcast.org. Again, that's healthpodcast.org. Enjoy the show. Welcome to this session of Health Podcast Summit 2025. I'm your host, Dan Kendall. Our next session features Bryan Barletta. Bryan is the newly appointed president of the combined Sounds Profitable and Podcast Movement organizations. Following the recent acquisition of the company that Bryan founded, Sounds Profitable, by Podcast Movement, the new and expanded organization will focus on their combined mission to, quote, connect creators, brands, and innovators while providing an unmatched event experience in the podcast industry, unquote. In this session, Bryan explains why podcasting can serve as the deepest part of your marketing funnel. He also reveals why healthcare isn't actually far behind other industries in podcast adoption, and how the audio-forward approach helps resolve the video versus audio debate. I'd like to take a moment to thank all our sponsors and partners who make Health Podcast Summit 2025 possible. A special thanks to our gold sponsor, BetterHelp, and to our silver sponsor, ZS. Please visit healthpodcastsummit.com for links to all these organizations and special offers. Now let's dive into our conversation with Bryan Barletta. Bryan Barletta, thanks so much for joining me here at Health Podcast Summit.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Bryan, we met a few years ago when you were just starting Sounds Profitable. You've crossed the 5-year anniversary of that. I know you've had some recent announcements that we're going to talk about and weave that into the conversation. But first of all, I'd like for you just to give the audience a little bit of an understanding of what Sounds Profitable has been for the first 5 years of its existence.
Yeah, so it has been and will continue to be a trade association for the global podcasting community. It's definitely more focused on the people who are in it professionally, but everything that we create on the content side, which is now up to 6 newsletters a week, and the research side is meant for people who are interested in taking it seriously to move from, hobbyists into the industry and to break it down at that level to pull them up and to help them engage. And so we are a flat fee association, so there's no varying prices. It's $500 a month. That's what YouTube pays. That's what you guys pay. It's all the exact same thing. We don't require contracts. It's month to month on that end because we want to make sure that we're in service of everybody on there. And they get consulting, they get discounts on events, they get access at other events that we're trying to get people into and on stage and all of those things. And we connect people like MediaLink does, but like I like to say, like $500,000 a year is out of range for us. We're at $500 a month, and like the IAB, we're pushing these focuses and trying to grow everybody equally and really elevate the people who are trying to grow the space. So we don't take equity advisor or board seats in any external companies, and we don't take commission or kickback. So that's really my favorite part because, Podcast Movement was last week when we're recording this right now. And the week before, I probably sent about 500 introductions between partners and people they wanted to connect with. And it's really fun to just learn what they're interested in and who they should get to know and say like, hey, I think you should collaborate versus, hey, I think you should just know each other and know that we're helping grow this industry instead of being, the people right at the top of it.
Well, you're certainly doing that. You're certainly helping to grow it. When you and I met in person at Podcast Evolutions in Chicago earlier this year, that was the first time we had a chance to meet in person. And I can honestly say my only regret was that I didn't join your organization sooner, because already just working with you, understanding and collaborating with other partners, it's made a real step change. So if anybody's listening to this, and actually throughout this conversation, we're going to talk about ways that organizations can benefit and participate with Sounds Profitable. Now, just before Podcast Movement in Dallas, which was in August, you made a big announcement. So Sounds Profitable was acquired by the Podcast Movement organization. You're going to be the president of the combined organization. Both brands will continue to go forward in their own right, and you're not losing any headcount. So it's really a combination of your organizations, and you're going to be heading it up. So I know a few years ago, there was a lot of over-exuberance in the industry, perhaps some inflated acquisitions and some outbidding of one another as people tried to grab real estate. What does this combination, this merger of your organizations, what does that sort of signal to the industry? Is this you're clinging to a life raft, or is this a sign of some of the positive things that are underway in your respective organizations, and now you're combined one?
What this really is that there was the opportunity to combine forces to really amplify things that we were starting to get into, which is events. Like, for example, we're going to be at Advertising Week in October, and I kind of make it up as I go. And I promise so little that like it can't really disappoint when I'm just like, yeah, I couldn't get the TV working with the AV there, but we're all on stage and we're presenting and it looks good. So now I have the event support there, and now they have the person in the industry listening. And so, it was an acquisition. There was a cash component to it and then equity. And what that really means is that like, I have been supercharged on this. I did not expect that what started as an ad tech blog for podcasting for creators and for the people in the industry would turn into what it is today. And now I've got the support and the buy-in from all these amazing people. And that means that we can take even bigger risks in service of the industry. While we are going to be at South by, we are not selling tickets for that. We just took an entire event, Podcast Movement Evolutions. We just took an entire event that had tickets and sponsorship, and said, there's just too much competition in the first half of the year. We are pushing people to basically duplicate their conversations and the value there. Let's buy in there. So I just removed a revenue stream, and we're going to figure out how to provide value first, unticketed for those things for South by, so that people have a reason to go experience it and figure out where they want to buy in. And then for the New York event, like we're increasing the cost, but we're also reducing the footprint. Like at the Gaylord chain of hotels that they've run at for years and around the country, you would get some local people that didn't have to travel in, but you'd also be able to, you could have done 10,000 people at some of those hotels, right? It got like, they're very, very large and everybody's right there. New York, we're going to have a maximum capacity. And so we are taking these things in and taking it seriously and making sure that what we build is in service of this industry, and how our relationships with the people in the industry are that we're held accountable, and that we're an industry org running events, which I think is a major failing of so many other event companies, that they're event companies charging for space that don't get it, right? That's why we buy space at South by, at Advertising Week, and all these other things, because they come to the table with these high price points for connected television and other mediums out there. They'll pay it without blinking for now, right? But podcasting couldn't afford that. So we buy it in bulk and divide it. And so this, you're right. I think it's funny we use the language merger because we wanted to make sure that it was clear that like both entities would still be existing on that end. But acquisition is really what happened. Like the entity as Sounds Probable is now absorbed into Podcast Movement. But the key thing there is I was put in charge of it. And the board is all people that we work very well with and have bet on, Tom and I, to make sure that all of this is successful.
Well, one of the direct impacts that you've had on what we're doing here is that I shared with you at the beginning of our working relationship when we joined as a member of Sounds Profitable. I shared with you that we were planning this summit. You gave me some great advice around the structure of it. And one of the things you really pushed me on was around whether we should charge anything for access. And I remember one of the things that you said was, we're launching this in October. And you said, why would I put a $30 or $300 price gate on it if somebody changes jobs in January and suddenly needs to learn all this stuff? And that just really resonated with me. And that's why this event is free to attend. That's why we're making this available publicly for people to be able to consume, just like you've done now in the Podcast Movement event that just happened in August. All that information, all those stages have been recorded and will be available for people free of charge online. So I really want to encourage people to go and find that. Obviously, you miss out on the networking, but you have an opportunity at South by and in September of next year to participate in that. We will go back and talk about that later in this conversation. Let's talk about what happened in Dallas. You were on stage talking about the ROI of podcasting. So this is one of the things that really trips people up, I think, in the healthcare space, is they try to figure out exactly what all this costs and how do they actually figure out where's the data that they could point to that this actually made a difference in their business and their sales or in their reach in whatever way. What are some of the things that you took away from that conversation?
I think that the ROI is really important to just understand like what budget it's coming out of, right? And I do think that podcasting for brands or organizations that are trying to drive revenue, like should treat it as marketing and advertising, right? And so it's asset creation and then you have to grow it. So you do have to market it, and you have to determine, like, are your channels big enough and this is the people already in your channels that are going deeper, or is this a way to get more people into your channels? But remember, like, this is like the deepest aspect of your funnel, right? This is where the people who said, like, absolutely, I have a 30 minutes for you once a week, once a month, whatever it is. So it's really important to figure out where it fits. But it is an opportunity to create more engaging and informative content around a topic that's relevant to you guys, that can be used in so many different forms. Can it become a blog post? Can it become a newsletter? Can it become a LinkedIn post? Can it then be a video asset for a clip where it's you saying something intelligent or pulling somebody else up as a peer and being able to be seen together with them and use that for marketing? I really fall into the LinkedIn trap for a lot of B2B stuff, but when we take this specific clip right here and we put it on LinkedIn with me saying this with you next to it, I'm going to commend you about how great you're making me look, because your account's going to be posting this, tagging me in it, and then I'm going to reshare it and comment on it, and that's going to get me attention from your audience, which I didn't have. So I think it's a vessel to have conversations you couldn't have normally, and I think you'd look at it as the sales prospecting cycle. I think it's an ad ultimately, because you're driving people to either listen to the next episode or to something that's going to financially benefit you or get them into your pipeline. I think it's retention and further engagement from the people that you have just a little bit of who want more. And then you can figure out like what that is. And we're seeing so many brands out there create content channels and hire editors from major publications to come run that for them. But it can also just be a way to make more social media posts, anything like that. It can be any varying aspect of it. You just really need to know what you're doing going into it, and you need to be consistent with it. And I would rather see someone scale up than scale down. And I'd rather see someone record a bunch of things that they never use and make sure that it's for them and never publish it than abandon it.
We had your partner, Tom Webster, on another session. We talked mostly about his book, but I know he's, 15, 16 years at Edison Research before he joined
18.
you at Sound. 18 years at Edison Research. Okay, a long time. So doing a lot of research there. We've also got Gabriel Soto, who's going to join us and talk about some of the work that's being done at Edison. But Sounds Profitable does a lot of research, as you can expect, with Tom Webster there inside your organization. So we spoke before about some of the work that we could do together specifically in the health space. But before we jump into that, is there anything that you can share with us around the sort of research that you do already, and just sort of give the audience an overview about the sorts of things that you're unearthing to people who are interested in podcasting?
Yeah, we come at it from two angles, right? We come at it from the audience, their perception of advertising, which is what we do in the Q1. That's what's fielded then. And so it's the perception of advertising in, I think, 22 or 23 channels. It originally was the podcast advertising landscape. Tom has created such a clever way of viewing it and going through it that we're finding people who identify as primary consumers, and there's different consumption habits per channel that define that, of ad-supported mediums. So not just podcast listeners and how they feel about ads, but ad-supported podcast listeners who listen to a substantial amount of it, right? But we also have that for TikTok and Facebook and newsletters and all these different channels, and it's really fun there. And that gives us perception of how we compare, because radio has this bad vibe of being 21 minutes of ads per hour, right? And so how close is the perception between radio and podcasting becoming over the years? We want to track on that. The other one that will be released around the time that this is live is about listeners, right? It's about their consumption, the people who are and aren't listening to podcasting. And there's people that we can convert. There's people that we're never going to get with reasons that make clear sense that are not worth banging our heads against. And then there's people we can get more of. One of the things that I love is that Tom likes to point out every year the people that have ever listened to a podcast and the people who listen monthly. And that rate the gap's getting smaller, but it's still it's pretty hefty. I think it's 40% or higher on that of the people that have consumed it and then consume monthly. So we have so much more opportunity to convert those people, and we're seeing it, right? But what can we do to accelerate that? What can we know about those people in between, or the people who have converted? It's really exciting we really push hard. Research is something that we choose to do, and we have sponsors who get benefits to ask custom questions and then get rights to some of the raw data and things like that. But all of the research is led by Tom, and there's nothing that we field that's public that isn't something that we chose to do ourselves, not funded or influenced on that end. But what we're realizing with a 5,000 person study twice a year, we have a lot of bites of that apple, and some of them don't make sense for us to be the ones to present, right? Like there's, different ethnic groups or different genders or everything, socioeconomic standing, and we're going to start figuring out how to put those in hands of more people, because just like I encourage you to do, you shouldn't gate all these things. We've never sold our research, but there's a certain point where nobody wants 40 webinars a year from Sounds Profitable. Maybe they do. I don't have time for that right now to keep it all in check, but maybe they have time for 40 reports about podcasting from people who you should be listening to once to 4 times a year minimum.
So all that research is available for free, as you mentioned, but we've also discussed how we could potentially work with other health partners to collaborate on some of the research we can do. And I know that Tom really leads this up, but could you just give our audience a little bit of an insight about what sorts of things you might think we'd be able to create together?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. When we've talked about it, I don't fully understand what your audience, and so everybody here listening is looking for specifically. So when I say that, I'd love to hear from you. Contact Dan, contact me. We'll loop it all together and have a conversation. But what we're doing is we're grabbing for now the U.S. and very soon we're going to be expanding into more countries. We're getting the consumption, the consumers of it, right? Ad-supported podcasts and general podcasts, the listeners and non-listeners, all of those different things. And we can break it down by podcast categories. We can break it down by who they are, where they are to a degree, all of those different things. So understanding what's appealing for the healthcare industry to, one, utilize for what they need to build, right? Is somebody waiting for a true crime pharmaceutical podcast? Maybe, I'm sure there's true crime podcasts that are killing it out there with a doctor leading it, right? For that unique aspect there. But what are the other categories and interests and overlap on that end? What are people really looking for that's not there? But I think the other is, that's for the internal aspect, but it's what do they want to be associated with? Right? We have one that will be coming out in the near future about companion podcasts, right? A TV show or a movie, and then the podcast that follows along with it. And there's different groups and organizations that we work with who decided to buy into helping us present that, getting it more visible, because that fits with their brand and their goals. So I think it's getting more and more open-ended, and some of those things will have the data right now, and others are, okay, well, how do we add that as a custom question on the back end? How do we figure that out? How does it advance a group? But I think in this field, I think this is everything from an advertising tool to a really intimate community. And I think that for healthcare, there are things where it is really cool to hear from someone who is going through what I'm going through. I met a woman at Podcast Movement who is doing a podcast like that about a health condition she's going through, and that is helping her and helping the people there. But then there's others about topics, right? All different drugs, the weight loss drugs, the GLP-1s and things like that. Where do I get a source and information that I can learn from instead of reading a medical document or, not trusting what the source is. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what the community in the healthcare space is looking for on research. But the short is either we have it now or we can get it in the future. And if it's going to amplify their involvement in podcasting, we're here for it.
That wasn't a test, Bryan, but if it was, you would have passed it. Because I think sometimes admitting that maybe we don't know exactly what the audience is looking for and that we can have a conversation around it is just a sign of strength and awareness. So I appreciate that invitation. And I was going to, even before you gave your answer, I was going to extend the same invitation, which is, Sounds Profitable is a fantastic organization. We're so pleased to be a member of it. If anyone's interested in collaborating on some of this research and adding questions into the surveys that they have the ability to do, please, let's get in touch and let's talk about that. So thank you, Bryan, for your answer on that, and your candor. So one of the things that also comes up a lot, and I've seen you speak on some other videos and podcasts around this, is around the use of video and podcasts. And one of the words that I heard you say earlier this year is something that I've picked up in my vernacular, which is audio forward. I've been using the word audio first and saying it's not audio only, it's audio first. You say it's audio forward. So just to give all of our audience a little bit of a context here, because a lot of people are asking, like, should I even still do a podcast? Are they even still a thing? Because I'm hearing that I should be doing YouTube videos. What would you say about the use of videos? Is it either or video or audio, or is it both and in different contexts? What can you share from your perspective?
Well, the audience isn't confused, right? The latest research that we put out says that podcasting can be audio or video, right? It's not either or for a lot of people. That's the biggest group that grew. To them, a podcast is whatever they want it to be, right? And if they're consuming it on YouTube, they're going to expect a visual component. Whether they watch it or listen to it is up to them, but is the option on there. When they consume it on an audio platform, they don't need the visual format. But one of them, the visual format, like we can scroll past LinkedIn, we can scroll through TikTok and see a clip of this, and we can decide, do I want to give it a minute of my time? There's no equivalent on audio. And so I think that truthfully, like most of us, like I've recorded one podcast in my entire career where we were just on audio. We used clean feed and we didn't have video. And like, I was just like slumped down like this, like just thinking. And like, I probably said smarter things because like I got to be comfortable and I didn't have to worry about all of that. And that's neat there. And thanks for everybody who got to see my bald spot, right? Like there's no production on that end. But we talked over each other. We had to repeat things and start things over, and it was uncomfortable there. You use it for the social clues. So what I would say is be less precious about it. I do believe most people don't want to watch like a webinar style podcast. I think the Kelseys probably get away with it because of who they are, but they still have a set design behind them, right? So like at what point is that okay on there? But if you can be in person and you can do that, if you can batch record it, like I think doing audio and video is valuable. I think it gives you something, and you can always throw the video away, but you can't, like, I guess you now can AI generate video, but I don't want to watch your AI generated video. But I think Taylor Swift got on a YouTube live stream called New Heights and called it a podcast, and nobody argued with her. And so like, maybe a podcast is whatever the audience wants to watch. Maybe it is quicker production. Maybe it's the opportunity for unique distribution. I believe audio forward is the key of it. I think a soap opera could be a podcast by the current definition of it, because the intent is not to have it visually on the screen at all times, but to be able to listen to it and understand it, right? So I think that podcasting is the freedom for open distribution and the opportunity to not use your eyes.
Leave it to Taylor Swift to finally get, the use of podcasts makes some clarity around whether it's video or audio. It doesn't matter. It's still a podcast.
Well, we like skipped over it, right? Like we didn't even celebrate that. We're on to the next thing that podcasting is being dragged through the coals for, and like not doing well enough because we're a small industry that is taking from other people, right? Like Amazon, what Amazon did with Wondery, like that team was dissolved into other groups. They're not slowing down on audio. They just are not using the word podcasting on their P&L, right? It's going to be on groups like us, like Owl & Co. and all these others to draw that circle around Amazon spend and revenue and whatnot and say, this we believe comes from podcasting, because it is in everybody's best interest who isn't in the open distribution game to lock that down as like, that's just media we create, right? Separating it out gives it too much power. Podcasting is one of the very final open distribution platforms. Email is, I don't know how we get away from email. I'm very thankful for email. It's where I consume most of my media. But podcasting, like, you get to, if all of a sudden Riverside turns this off, me and you can go record this over a phone call, right? Like you can send everybody a laser disc with this on it. Like nothing's going to stop you. But Severance season 2, if they decide, or season 3, they decide not to renew it, they can't go premiere it at a movie theater. It's locked down. It's somebody else's. It's on a private platform.
I think that's really the difference around what podcasting is, because it did start in sort of an open format. And yes, it is beginning to go into more proprietary formats. We've seen Netflix start a podcast business. We see Spotify going into the video business. We see YouTube going into the podcast business. And really, it's just becoming a real mix about where do people consume and how do they consume it? And how do you serve their interest by giving them things that they can do when they're commuting and in their kitchens and so forth. So it's like saying—
Or when they're scrolling, right? What happens if somebody wants 1 minute from this conversation and not the full half an hour, 45 minutes, right? Why is that bad? Wherever you get your podcasts, right? Let's get in front of them and give them the opportunity to give us 1 minute or 3 hours, right? And then go from there, figure out what works, figure out where we find that audience, and figure out what matters to us.
So some of our audience will be new to this. They'll be real rookies and maybe not even listen to podcasts and just trying to understand. Maybe they're listening and watching because they want to understand how they can apply this within their business or within their own practice or whatever it might be. And we're going to have other people who are real veterans who are power listeners and consume podcasts 9 or 10 hours a week, like me, and are really thinking, okay, we've already got a podcast. We want to grow it. We want to add more and so forth. In your position, running alongside and helping to navigate the podcast industry, when you look over the fence here at the health industry and you see us trying to run up alongside you, what are some of the things that you would suggest to us that we do so we don't trip over ourselves and that we can really embrace the opportunities that exist right now?
Ooh, it's funny you word it like that because I don't know if I can look at another specific industry like. I couldn't say like, oh yeah, auto's killing it. Go take a look at what the automotive industry is doing. Like, I don't know if there's a specific B2B category other than like Guru that has like nailed podcasting. And I would not recommend that unless everybody has an ebook they want to sell or a health course. And like, maybe that's it. Like, and no shame on that end. But then there's creators who sell creative courses. And that's something that you should already be skilled and versed in. But when we think about healthcare overall and all of that, and on the professional level and on the more B2B level there, I think it's a really cool thing. Like, you're not running alongside the podcast industry. You're an area of podcasting that has infinite potential and hasn't had a lot of people step up and take risks. And every 2 years, podcasting is a different industry. So I don't know. Actually, Joe Rogan couldn't start today, right? Like the hosts of Fear Factor and a shock jock comic probably is not going to become the number one podcast if it started today. We're watching shows that cover certain political alignments shift drastically because the climate has changed on whether they matter or not now, right? We're watching influencers sometimes beat out journalists on these things. We're watching people go independent or new organizations form. I think it's really just figuring out, like, is this content or is it a sales vessel or marketing vessel? And if it's content first, I think most people take more risks. And if it's sales and marketing vessel, I would look at the content that takes risks and I would emulate that. But I think the only advice I would give is if something feels like it could be fun and your audience is giving the signals like they're not going to run away if you try it, I'd rather everybody have fun at their job. Also, don't let your boss make you make a podcast and not pay you for it or not count it as part of your hours. Like, make sure that this is how you become head of audio at your organization.
Great advice. Yeah, I think a lot of people are beginning to look at this, and we know that healthcare is slow to move, and a lot of that protects us to ensure that risks are well assessed and evaluated before we're treating patients and doing things in the field. And media is no stranger to that. I remember 25 years ago having conversations about whether we should put things on this web thing that's coming up. And that's not an exaggeration. I literally remember the boardrooms and the people sitting around the table that were having that conversation 25 years ago. Why are you having that reaction?
Because I was part of the team that helped build banner ads that had to have the scrollable terms and services or whatever, all the legal in there, like 320 by 50 iPhone banner ads that had that. It basically was just like a logo of what the brand was. And then that, and like, yeah, it's wild to see it. But like, yeah, I think just don't beat yourself up over the slowness. Like again, I can't point to another industry. The cruise industry isn't killing this. The real estate industry isn't killing this. Like, this might be a level playing field for once for someone like pharmaceutical. And guess what? There are pharmaceutical radio ads and TV ads. So you have the experience of the things you want to follow where some other industries don't. So I think there's a lot you guys can build off of very, very easily. There's a lot of history on there, and there's a lot of places where you can be flexible and you can't.
It's a great example you gave there because not everybody has a car. Not everybody lives in a city where they want to have one, and not everyone goes on cruises. there are a lot of things that the podcast industry is targeting that just doesn't apply to everyone. But I think health is one of the areas that all of us have some degree of health or sickness. It's a spectrum. So we're always floating along that spectrum in some way, shape, or form. So even if it's not us, ourselves personally, that are dealing with something where we may want to recover or be healthier, there's people in our lives, there's things in the news. So there's something that can touch everyone in healthcare. So I think it's a huge opportunity to think about how we can apply this podcast opportunity way back from the days of radio. You also mentioned radio. I remember a conversation I had with a lady from a pharma company, and she was saying, I really love what you're doing, but I don't think my company would ever do anything like this. I think it was around recruiting patients for a clinical trial. And she said, I don't think my company would ever do that. And she called me back about 2 weeks later and said, Dan, I was in the car going to pick up my kids, and I listened to the radio, and my company was advertising this clinical trial on the radio. So she said, I'm wrong. We do audio. How do we take that we're doing on drive time between 4 and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday and apply that to a more contextually relevant targeted audience, that we can actually target these ads into the geographies and the places where we want to try to reach those audiences?
Well, but the thing that I would challenge is that, like, I don't envy marketers right now, or people who have to spend ad dollars, because think about it this way. I've never met anybody who was like, man, I cracked open that channel for my company and we killed it and they doubled my salary. But I super have met people who are like, wow, I blew $100,000 testing out something new and I got fired. So that's like, I have compassion for those people, right? Like, is it easier to just keep putting it in Facebook and radio and TV? Is it easier to your email campaign and all of that, where like nobody's really happy with it, but like it's not tanking yet, but we're not rewarding risks, especially at bigger companies. You look at loss and you cut those people. And so to the people who are choosing to tune in here, who are at those big companies that are taking those risks, like, we're here for you, like, infinitely. Every single one of us is here for you, because if you crack that, you might not get a double salary, but somebody else watching this could get a job out of it, could get a career out of it, could be able to build something new because you helped your company enter this space.
Yeah. And another true story, another wonderful lady, I won't mention her name, but very smart lady. She'll know who she is if she hears this. We were having a conversation at a conference where I described some of the things we were doing a few years ago. And she said, that sounds fantastic. We would love to be the first ones to do that. Can you send me some examples of where it's been done before? And I said, did you hear what you just said? You want to be the first one to do it? Can you send me examples of where it's been done before? I said, so that doesn't really mix. And she said, well, you know what we're like in pharma, we have to have data in order to be able to do things. And that's the thing that keeps us from doing something. So if we can take, methodical, well thought out approaches and think about all the options and figure out how we can use this, I think there's a real opportunity. Yeah. Bryan, you've been really generous with your time. I want to close just speaking about what's happening at South by Southwest. So you had a big presence there this year in 2025. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of people in the health, pharma, med device industry sending me pictures of what was there, showing me the excitement and saying, Dan, I think you're onto something. Like, this is really a big thing. That was you. You were leading all of that. And I know now in your new role as president of Podcast Movement and Sounds Profitable, that you're going to even make a bigger splash. You alluded to it a little bit earlier in this conversation. So what can we expect in March, the 12th to 18th of 2026? What's going to be there?
Yeah, so where we had the podcast stage last year was like at the armpit of the convention center. Like, you had to know that you like where it was and want to go there. You had to pass the giant line for Vox's like live shows to then get to where we were. So it was awesome to see 50 to 150 people in the space the whole time, and that really made me proud. We're stepping it up. There are not enough brands in podcasting right now, and companies in podcasting that have a footprint at South by. iHeart's been there for a while. They do the podcast awards there too. Spotify, which I guess they're not in podcasting, they're in creators now. So I don't know if I'll count that. Vox has been really bought in for a long time, and us, right? That's kind of been it, right? Everybody else has maybe bought a panel here and there, but not an activation. So our goal is, how do we all come together? How do we bring the best content for business and creators and all of that and get it on a stage, either official or open to the public one? And then how do we get those companies that don't have the SiriusXM house or the Acast house? How do we get them to come together with us? And we're having great conversations to have like a space there that we're all inviting everyone into. And then look, everything ends at like 4:00 for the official panels. If we got that space, we're going to do live shows, and South by is a great opportunity for that. And we don't get to celebrate podcasting as much as I think we should. And we're going to change that. And so again, not a ticketed event on our end. There will be substantial and valuable opportunity to attend without a South by ticket, but we really do encourage people to buy one, especially because the music pass will get you into all the official podcast stuff and most of the things you do want to see, and is the cheaper level one. And they are restructuring so much there. So your buy-in does help vote and help have a weight of what is going to happen next there. But I truly believe what we're creating will be no more expensive for someone in or interested in the podcast industry to attend than any of the podcast movement evolutions that we've had before, give or take a little bit. I think the ticket price alone being removed on our end probably makes up for any additional costs on flights and hotels. But I really encourage people who have a perception that South by Southwest costs a lot to check if that's a pre-COVID or post-COVID experience that they have.
Excellent. Well, I'm really glad you're doing that. And I'm really glad for the invitation that you've made to include Health Podcast Network and all of the health creators out there to be a part of that.
Please.
We've talked a little bit about the Health Podcast Festival that we're going to run at the same period, as you say, to celebrate what's happening at the intersection of health and podcasting. And we will also be announcing awards for the Health Podcast Awards, which we're announcing at the same time as this summit. So people who have a podcast in 2025 can begin applying for the 2026 Health Podcast Awards, which will be awarded during the South by Southwest event in Austin, Texas, March 12th to 18th. So thanks for all your leadership there, for making that possible for people to come in. And yeah, we're going to get a ticket. We're going to be there, and hope a lot of people from the health environment will gravitate towards what you're putting together on the podcast stage. And we look forward to being a part of it.
And thank you for being a part of what we're doing too. I really think that you're doing some amazing stuff, and it's been really fun to collaborate with you on all of this.
My guest is Bryan Barletta, president of Sounds Profitable and Podcast Movement. Bryan, thanks for your time.
Thank you.